welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me for this fine podcast program is my co-host, Mr. Sean Kane. Sean, how are you?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. We also have with us for the first time our new producer, my cousin, Leah Rader. Leah, welcome to That's Enough Out of You.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here with you.
We are
Good to see you.
We are too.
We're thrilled to have you. So Leah is going to be
Great.
helping us out with the podcast. Sean, it's gotten too big now. It's bigger, too big
Right.
for the two
We
of
can't
us.
handle it, Billy. We can't handle it.
So
That's what I'm here for.
we're bringing in some help. Yeah. Well, thank you, Leah. Leah, you have some background in this, quite a bit of background doing this kind of stuff. You worked on a little show called The Voice in Germany.
Yes, I was an editor for The Voice of Germany and also Love Island in Germany. Well, we did it in Spain, but there too. And what else do we have? Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother, all those kind of shows, reality editing. That was my job in Germany. Exactly. So I'll be helping you guys with editing and graphic design and all that stuff.
Yeah, we need it. So, so thank you. We appreciate it. All right.
So what are we talking about today?
Yeah, this was a great episode. We Sean and I sat down through Zoom, of course, with one of the local sports heroes, football hero in this area, Northeast Pennsylvania, guy by the name of Coach Howanitz, who was a star player, coach, and he now has a couple of kids. His kids are playing Division I sports as they go to college. So, Sean, I mean, we went through quite a bit with George. Some of the topics we covered, we talked about NIL. What else did we go through with George?
Well, that was the big one, NIL. So NIL, for people who don't know, is name, image, and likeness, and it's where amateur sports are now able to pay. The amateur athletes are now able to get paid for their name, image, and likeness, and that changed the whole dynamics of college sports and specifically college football, because that's the biggest ratings draw and it brings in the most money. And it was just interesting to get his perspective of, being a former player, former coach, and then a father of two recruits that one is at the University of Pittsburgh and the other is at Boston College. So to get his perspective on, how the NCAA is dealing with this, and actually they're not dealing very good with it. And it's
Right.
It created the Wild West. So we talked to him about that. And it was just a real interesting conversation. We covered a lot of different topics. We covered local football here. We covered the big picture college football. And then we even covered a little baseball, Billy.
Yeah, we talked to him about because he's a big Red Sox fan, as are you, Sean, and with me being a Yankees fan. So it was literally like hours before Juan Soto signed his mega $1 million deal with the Mets. And
was it 765 for 15, I think?
765, but it's the total value of the contract is over 800 million with incentives.
I was riding on the subway when some guys heard about that, and they got so upset. The whole subway cart was talking about it. So
must be Yankee fans.
Well, the Yankees, I heard, offered him 760. The Red Sox offered him 700. So they were in the ballpark, but he went for the bigger money.
Well, that was the plan the whole time. He was going to go where the money was. So.
If you're agent to Scott Boras, that's usually what you do.
That's your MO. So we talked to him about that. He just had some wonderful insight about, all of these different things. It was really a pleasure to talk to him, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It was, we didn't know how long we were going to have him on for, Sean. We were thinking it'd probably be, half an hour, 45 minutes. We ended up almost an hour and a half with him.
Yeah.
Because it was just great conversation. So, we hope you guys enjoy it.
I'm very excited about this show.
Yeah.
Good.
We are too. All right, Leah. Well, thank you. Thanks, Sean. And
enjoy, everybody.
Enjoy the program.
Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right. Hey, George, how you doing?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, buddy. So, George, we want to really get into, NIL and the transfer portal and your perspective as an ex-coach and of course, having two sons playing Division I sports. But if you want to just give a quick bio of yourself, buddy, tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, George Howanitz. I'm a teacher. Used to be the football coach at Valley View, head track coach at Valley View. Played football at Valley View. Went to play football at Bucknell after that. Coached at McDaniel College for 2 years, Division III school in the northern part of Maryland, about 30 minutes from Gettysburg. After that, coached at Wallenpaupack for a couple of years, taught there, and then kind of been at Valley View ever since. And I'm retired from coaching a couple of years ago. Had a bunch of D1 kids that I've coached, and opportunity to win a pretty good amount of games at Valley View and get a pretty good perspective of high school sports. And then now I've retired the last couple of years from the football coaching to watch my son Adam plays football at Pitt. I got a son Dylan who plays baseball at Boston College, and my daughter's a sophomore at Valley View and involved in a lot of sports. So I'm more dad now than coach.
Nice. But George, you left out that you're also quarterback of the 92 state title team, buddy.
That is factual. I've had a nice opportunity to, state championship in high school, and then Patriot League champs in college. And then I got a chance to coach two Centennial Conference champions in college at Western Maryland. So I've been lucky enough to be around some great programs and reap the benefits of that.
Before we get into NIL, George, talk to me about that 92 team, because I remember following that team, and that team was really special. I mean, you had a lot of returning starters coming back from the year before, but really, I mean, I think the only close game in the regular season was North Pocono, if I remember, and then you just blew everybody out going into the playoffs.
Yeah, we had, we had a lot of starters coming back from the previous season. We were lucky enough, our senior year, everything had kind of gotten restructured as far as the state playoff system went. So the year before, it was kind of you had to run through the Eastern Conference to get to the state final, and we ran into Berwick the year before with Ron Paulus, who went on to play at Notre Dame, and they were a power-packed high school football team at the time for years. Ran into them, played a tough game. I think we lost 26-13 my junior year at Berwick, and then they restructured some things our senior year. So they were playing up a class. We stayed AA. They went to AAA. And, obviously we benefited from not having to run through Berwick again, because they ended up winning a state championship as well in AAA. But, we had some great guys coming back. North Pocono game, we won in the closing seconds of that game to keep an undefeated season. And then at that time, it was the first year that you could choose if you wanted to go to a district playoff or an Eastern Conference playoff. It was the only year I think that happened. And the teams that wanted to make the state championship game had to follow you on that route. So we went the Eastern Conference route that year. Ended up winning the Eastern Conference against Dallas, and then ended up winning a state championship a couple of weeks later.
So let's talk a little bit about NIL. So to me, my perspective of NIL is I think it should be the best thing that happened to college football. I think the players should get paid. It was long overdue, but I just think that the NCAA AA really created the Wild West. Like they're not enforcing a lot of the rules, and you just see a lot of nonsense going on in recruiting. But how do you feel about NIL and what's going on with it?
Well, I think it was set up to do what they wanted to do for the players, where these teams were making millions upon millions of dollars, and the players weren't getting anything from it.
Sure.
I remember watching the Johnny Manziel thing they did on Netflix, or one of the places where they were talking about how many millions of dollars worth of jerseys they sold with Manziel on the back of the jersey and his number. And, he didn't see any of that money. So I think that was the reason why they went to this. I think it was going to happen whether they liked it or not. I think the players were going to sue their way into it if the NCAA didn't make it happen. So I think they got ahead of it a little bit to do that. But it really is the Wild West. And I hear, my son being at Pitt, and my son just having gone into the portal last year, leaving Westchester to go to Boston College. You really get a good, I got a good, at least front row seat to see how this thing actually works. But it really is the Wild West. I mean, it's there's huge amounts of money being thrown around. I was reading the other day that quarterback that's going to Michigan could be around $10 to $12 million he's getting from
Bryce Underwood. Yeah,
from Barstool and some of the big donors that Michigan has. Which I don't know. It obviously sets up a slippery slope there with some of these kids. But I just hear the horror stories. No, I don't want to say horror story. I think of it as a horror story, being a sports, a non-professional sports lover. My son sees it a lot at Pitt. Like, you'll get a kid who got $300,000 and he's a backup. So now the starter who's not getting $300,000 wants to know where his money is. So, it sets up a lot of strange, I guess, decisions that players have to make. And also, I guess, the colleges and their programs are going to have to make as you move forward with this.
Yeah. And you brought up Bryce Underwood. So he was committed to LSU for a long time. And then Michigan comes in, and like you said, they're throwing around the money, $10 to $12 million. And to me, it's setting such a bad precedent, because if he was in the transfer portal, say he was a senior with fifth-year eligibility, and he's already established as a quarterback, then okay, you want to pay him that, you have the money in your collective, pay him. But to set the precedent of paying a kid who never took a snap in college football, and you're paying him $10 to $12 million, I mean, yourself, George, for every 5-star recruit that went on to do great things, I could show you 10 that were a bust. So there's no guarantee that this kid is going to be a superstar. And now you're guaranteeing him this money. You better come up with it. And it's just setting a bad precedent because NIL wasn't designed to entice high school athletes to come to your school. That's not what it's supposed to be about.
No, and that's why I just think they got ahead of it, but they didn't do enough when they did get ahead of it. I just think it's like I said, it really is an open, and I don't know if you guys know this, and I don't know how many people know this, but all these big recruits have what they call like handlers. They have they're agents pretty much. I mean, you can't have an agent when you're in college, but you can have these advocates and handlers and all these people now that are pretty much behind the scenes working all these deals for them. And like I said, that's what, Texas runs through that with Arch Manning, right? He's making quadruple probably what Ewers is making, sitting on the bench, getting 5 or 10 plays a game. And like I said, it just sets up it's a slippery slope, I think, then for the colleges, because they got to be able to match that or figure out what they're going to do with a kid who's their starter might be making less money than somebody who's a backup. So it's a tough situation. And I think they're going to do something in the near future.
They have to. Yeah. There has to be some kind of structure around it, George. I think it's the other thing I think it's going to do eventually is it's going to damage the professional game as well, because these kids are making all this money right out of high school. What motivation do they have to succeed in college and get drafted into the NFL? Some of them, have never had any money their whole life. They're going to get all this money from NIL. They're going to be happy with that, and they're going to, go their merry way when they could have, in other circumstances, probably had a great career in the NFL, or at least had a chance to.
Yeah, Bill, I agree. You can take it from the other side too. Me being I love college. I think college football right now is the best, and college basketball, I'm even going to say, are probably the two best sports on the planet right now as far as watching
I agree.
I love, obviously now with college football, I think one of the things it might do is get kids to stay in college longer because they might make more money staying there than they
Yeah.
going to the NFL. So they won't be coming out after the 2 or 3 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I just, I just enjoy, I love college basketball now too, because you're having, the one team's playing the 2 team, the one team's playing the 4 team, the one team's playing and I just think it sets up such a nice, day in and day out. If you really like sports, it sets that up. But like I said, they're really technically, I think now, professional athletes. They've gone away from that amateur status now, and they're really banking on them being more pros than amateurs now at this point.
So talk to me a little bit, George, about your experience, as having 2 sons that went through this process, and in your perspective as a father and also as a coach. I'm sure that coaching background and being an ex-player, that gives you a perspective that a lot of parents don't have.
Yeah, and I really have, with my 2 sons, I really have both ends of the spectrum, because I have Adam, who's a walk-on, so he's not getting any of that money kind of to go to college. He's just going because he likes to play, and they offered him a roster spot, and he's practicing every day and doing everything he does. Which on his end, the NCAA rules change next year because they go to the 105 rule. So they're, every college now is going to trim that roster from, like Pitt's at 120. They got to go from 120 to 105. And the majority, or the reason behind it technically, is they want to get rid of walk-ons. They want the walk-ons to kind of trickle down and have to go to some of those other types of schools. I think teams like Nebraska and some of those schools, they carry like 150. And a lot of their kids are the walk-on type. So the NCAA this year with that 105 rule is trying to chisel that number down. So Adam's in a situation now where, his hope is, and I think he'll be fine with it, but his hope is he'll make that 105. And then me, at least from a dad perspective, I'm hoping that 105 turns into him getting some money to stay and go to school.
Sure.
So he's on that end of the spectrum. And all the sports have a set number now. I'm just using college football, I know, because it's 105. Right. And then Dylan was in the opposite role, where he put himself in the portal, and he had schools almost in a bidding war, to get him to go to their college to pitch. So a very different, situation for me as a dad. Both, it's a tough situation to be in. Both were great students. One of the drawbacks, I think, to the NCAA rules is, like Adam playing football, he's a 3/8 student, but he can't get any academic money because it's illegal NCAA wise to play a sport and get academic money, because teams used to bypass the rule with scholarships and give kid an academic scholarship and sit him on a team. So they got rid of that a couple of years ago. So he's really in a kind of a bad situation as far as his parents having to pay for college. But we're hoping with that 105 come around that might flip a little bit for him.
The thing is, though, like with the walk-on rule, like I don't like them trying to get rid of walk-ons, because I think they're damaging the game by getting rid of too many of these traditions. Like so many schools, like Texas A&M has a walk-on tradition, even Notre Dame has one. I mean, and you're getting rid of it. It's just another tradition that you're moving away from. Like now with these super conferences, you're ruining a lot of those traditional rivalries that they used to have, like Oklahoma, Nebraska, and this and that. So it's just one more tradition that they're getting rid of, and I just don't like it. You're moving too far away from what the college game used to be. Do you agree with that or no?
I think I agree with you. I think the reason behind it was the colleges all wanted to pay these players. So the NCAA said, all right, if you want to pay them, then pay them. Don't pick and choose your 10 or 15 or 80 kids in football that you're going to pay. It's put up or shut up. You guys want to pay, so pay every kid that's on the team a scholarship type of at least a scholarship type of money to get them through school. And then, that's where you're chiseling away that, 120 down to 105 or 125, depending on the team. So I think it was like a give and take kind of deal. You want this, then do this if you want it so bad. And I think that's kind of what set it up.
And I think some of the bigger schools have an advantage, because I know Notre Dame, I follow recruiting a lot, and in their walk-on program, they had a walk-on snapper a couple of years ago. And he was getting, last year, I believe, and he was getting NIL money. He was getting 6 figures, and he's just a walk-on. He wasn't even a scholarship player. But see, they tie it to charities, and they tie it to the community. So the kid was doing for a local business. He was doing commercials and stuff, and he was working for it, but he was getting paid. And here's a walk-on, and he's getting almost 6 figures in NIL money.
Well, and that's why a lot of these kids, when they, it comes down to the recruiting, what are you giving me in that recruiting process? I mean, I could tell you this. I mean, there's some coveted players on Pitt's team from the they're playing this year that the year before we're getting, well, come back to Pitt, we'll give you 300,000. Come to Georgia, we'll give you 500,000. So and then the athletes have to decide if that's something they want to do or or stay where they're at. So I mean, that's just part of the deal now. And different schools do different things. Like you said, I know there's some schools where they give walk-ons money. Pitt is not one that does that. They're paying the guys their scholarships, not so much the walk-on. So every school has their own rules to do that. And this 105 hopefully will kind of change that and at least even out that part of the playing field. It should be a little bit.
Now, how about like as far as baseball? Like, obviously college football is the biggest sport, so the NIL money is going to be a lot higher there. But is there a lot of opportunities in baseball with your son scholarship?
Yeah, I think it's not as much as the football. Obviously, the money is not as much. Boston College is a $91,000 a year school, so it's like going to an Ivy League school. So if you get, you're getting that paid for, it's a pretty good chunk compared to some of these schools that are, 30 and 40,000. So, Dylan, when he was going through the process, that's kind of what it was. It's a lot of back and forth. Like he had UConn, he had Boston College, he had some other big schools that were after him. So it was, talk to Boston College, call back UConn and tell them what Boston College gave you and see if they can match or do. So it really is like you really get schools almost in a bidding war. It's almost haggling somebody if you're buying a new car where you can, you got a couple of dealerships and you're trying to get that best deal. But that's what's going on now. I mean, that's the opportunity you have. That's why these kids are constantly jumping in the portal. You can jump in the portal. Like I said, you could be a player at Pitt where maybe you're just on scholarship and now you could jump in the portal and be getting $500,000 a year from a school that you didn't get, the year before. So that's the reason I think why when people ask me, why are all these kids going to the portal? That's the main reason why. I think a lot of it isn't so much the playing time with a lot of them. It's your ability to cash in, especially if you've been playing a role at a college and you can now cash in and go somewhere else. Sure.
And then
I think that's,
go ahead, Bill.
I think that's also going to affect, the pro baseball too, Georgia, as we said, because if you can make more money staying in college, then, I mean, a lot of these kids get drafted and they stay in college, for a little bit, but then that money's too enticing and they want to get started in the system of the team that they, that drafted them. Now, I think it's probably more enticing for them to stay in college and not go into the system. So that may impact their ability to get into the major leagues eventually, because if they are in the college system longer, it's going to take them longer to go through the pro team system.
Yeah, and Bill, the baseball especially, and football to a certain extent, with those drafts being slotted, like those draft picks are slotted now with money, like you pretty much know where you're going to make, in that first round of that draft or whatever, because the money's pretty much set. Now you could get a signing bonus that could blow that out of the water, but they pretty much can tell, I think, year to year now how much they're going to make. So sure. I agree with you. I mean, if you can stay at a college and, like I said, if you're that kid from Michigan, you're going to make $12 million, whatever it is. And then now you're going to go into the NFL and you're going to be slotted at, whatever your contract is. I mean, they can really play that up as long as they want. So, and you're right. Some of them, it might put them in a severe disadvantage and maybe others, if they're not making that money, they might be the ones that come out earlier so they could. And again, what's that going to do to the final product? I mean, who knows? I think that's something down the line everybody's going to have to look at and see how the sports have changed in the last, 5 years or 6 years or 10 since this NIL agreement came about.
Definitely.
And didn't you say something too about your son at BC gets like $10 Red Sox tickets or something? That's a nice thing.
They have. So they have, one of the reasons why he went there was the deal that the students get was, we're big, huge Sox fans and, the students get their $10 tickets when they can go to the games. And my son every night is going, it's nice being at you're at a major D1 school, like especially Boston College. Hockey is huge. So it's one of the things he's really fallen in love with now. They go to the BC hockey games, once a week or wherever they're home. And the nice part of being at Boston College is most of the best teams in the country are right there in that that little chunk of schools. So they're playing, you know, the number one, they're like the number 1 or 2 team in the country. They're constantly playing the 3 team, the 5 team, the, you know, the 6 team. So it's a really interesting dynamic. Some of the perks you get, I think, you know, being in that kind of system. And obviously you guys know this, like one of his big eye openers when he first got there was the, you know, the gazillion things of clothes they got, sweatshirts, t-shirts,
Sure.
you know, team gear, you know, 3 pairs of New Balance sneakers, new baseball gloves, 3 pairs of New Balance. You know, they're sponsored by New Balance. New Balance is their BC's their flagship school to take care of. So I mean, he's constantly just jackets, you know, everything you could think of, they get from New Balance. So it's a, you know, on top of that money that you're getting to go to school and do all that to play sports, there's a lot of little miscellaneous items that, you know, put schools over the top compared to some of the other ones.
And a couple of Ranger draft picks on that BC team too. Gabe Perreault and Drew Fortescue. Yep.
Billy loves hockey.
Dylan sent me a picture a couple of days ago. He's like, here I'm at the bar with who's going to be the number 1 draft pick this year in the hockey draft. It's an interesting dynamic when you're a college student and you're out with somebody or you know, having drinks with the person standing. And BC, I think, has the 1, 2, and 7th, I think, ranked players in the country right now as far as the NHL goes. So you know, it's an interesting dynamic compared to being at Westchester, where you're, you know, you're at a Division II school where you're fixing the field after the game's over because they, you know, that's the way things work.
Yeah, well, one of the things on my bucket list is the Beanpot tournament, the hockey tournament with BU, BC, Harvard, and I forget the 4th team. But they're 4 teams.
I think it's Northeastern or one. I think
Northeastern. You're right. Yeah, every year they do the Beanpot tournament. That's really cool.
So, Bill, there's an interesting story behind it that I didn't know about. So the students get tickets, obviously, for all the sporting events. They don't have to pay for the tickets. They get you know, the baseball team goes and they, you know, they sit in a section by themselves. But they have a pretty cool system at BC because that BU game is so big. They make you go to all the other games and you have to like scan your card. So you can't get a ticket for that game unless you go to the other games for the year. So that's why they're constantly going to all those games and football games and all the events, basketball games. The more events you go to, you build up points, and a certain amount of points get you a ticket for that BU hockey game, which is you know, that's the ticket for the year on, you know, on the campus. So
yeah, that's like the equivalent of Ohio State, Michigan in football. Yes. That's a huge game. Yeah. And we will be right back. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
So, George, how do you balance when you're going through the recruiting process with your sons? How do you balance, you know, the academic piece with the athletic piece? Because obviously, you know, the schools, Pittsburgh and BC, are 2 really good academic schools. So, but let's face it, there's a lot of schools, you know, that are football factories.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a little different situation just because, you know, Adam wasn't a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, or, you know, where you have like SEC teams after you and Big Ten teams. You know, he was, he had some offers from like a Monmouth and schools, some of the smaller schools, Bucknell, some schools like that. But, you know, obviously my 2 kids being decent in college, decent high school students, we wanted them to go to a decent academic, you know, program as far as for their majors and things like that. So, you know, Adam's majored in business. So we knew Pitt had a really good business program. He got into their business school right out of high school. And then Dylan originally is a bio major at Westchester. So he was originally thinking about being a dentist. Now he's gonna, I think, go to the law, going to law school. So BC obviously great for that. So that obviously played a big role. I mean, we didn't want our kids to go to, any schools that were horrible academically. But it worked out that their options, I think, were all really good academic schools. And that's really something, I think, depending on where you're at, like if you're a kid who's a projected first round draft pick, to spend a couple of years at a school, I don't know if they're really worried so much about the academic part of it. They can, you obviously, no school is horrendous. A lot of these schools academically, I mean, but I think that's probably something where you're worried about cashing in, getting some kind of degree and working yourself out when you get to that point.
Well, let me ask you this, George, because you have a unique perspective, having seen it from the student athlete part, the coach part, and then now the parent. What, if when you look at the, I guess sometimes misplaced priority of athletics over academics at the high school level, at the college level, with parents pushing their kids, sometimes the coaches pushing the kids. From your perspective, how do you balance that? How do you make sure that the kids are able to perform academically, even with the pressures of the athletics and the time that it takes, all the practices and all of those things? And you have to make sure that the kids have enough time, they have enough help, they have enough, resources to be able to succeed academically, especially the kids that aren't going to make it into the in the D1 schools or into the pros.
Yeah, I think it's obviously being a teacher that was in our building, the academics to me was a big deal. So we would have some kids, if they owed a project, we would sit them out of a practice, sit them in a locker room, and they'd finish the project. That came first, but I know some places maybe aren't that way. I've always felt that you got to get your education. That comes first. They've, from a young age, my dad was a teacher. That was kind of instilled in me as a student athlete. So I try to do that with my kids moving through that I've coached. So, and my own kids for that matter. But it's a tough, like I said, it gets to a point where it's tough sometimes because you're the coach and then the parents may have a different perspective. So sometimes you're battling that, if they think that the athletics is more important than the academics, that's a tough battle to win. They're the parent, you're just the coach that's with their kid X amount of months during the year. So I was lucky enough. We had great parents, the ones that I coached, that were always kind of worked hand in hand with us, and it made our lives a lot easier. But I'm sure there's other places where, it's not as easy a task, and it'd be a little more of a tug of war with that coach. But like I said, I was just lucky enough to have the support of parents and the school behind you, and you could do those things where, you told somebody, hey, I'm sitting you out, you're going to get your schoolwork done, or you're not going to be playing on a Friday night. And it seemed to work out. So, but again, I'm going to say this too. It helped when you're winning too. If you were losing every year, it probably would be there might be a lot more of a tug of war going on, but we were lucky enough to not have to kind of deal with that.
So let's move on to the transfer portal, George. You mentioned that a little bit earlier. So I agree with you. NIL is definitely a big issue with the transfer portal, but the way the rules are now, and you could transfer so many times, like I think they have to do something with that, where maybe you're allowed one transfer, and then you should be allowed an exception where if your coach, or more importantly, your position coach, changes jobs, you should be allowed to leave as well. But I think right now it's setting up, especially with younger kids coming in, like say a freshman, it's setting up because they'll have this attitude where play me or I transfer. And if you got a kid that, say he's got a high ceiling, but his floor is raw, like he's just a raw player and his floor is low, and he needs that year or maybe the red shirt. But as a coach, you're going to be pressured to play him, or you might see him enter the portal.
Yeah, and I really think that's happening. I mean, you see it. The quarterback from UNLV this year was the best example, right? He didn't get paid. So whatever, 3 games in, he just bagged it. He pretty much redshirted himself. Took the rest of the year off, and he'll go in the portal, and somebody will probably pay him, quadruple what he was supposed to make at UNLV. But and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the college coaches go to the pro level, because they don't want to deal with that, because it really is, they kind of do have you hostage. And you're seeing, like, a guy like Chip Kelly, where you're a head coach at UCLA and you say, hey, I'd rather be an OC at Ohio State, be able to go back to coaching again and not deal with all this crap that goes on with the portal. And it happens. I mean, I see it at Pitt, and obviously Adam tells me a lot that goes on there, but there's a lot of coaches where you have some kids you think are going to be your high ceiling kids, and you don't want to lose them. So you're pushing them ahead of some of the kids that might be, better with certain aspects of the game, because you want them to stay. And it sets up, I think, a tough deal for the college coaches. And even with recruiting and, not knowing, I mean, where you're going to, Pitt's quarterback who played the last 3 weeks has put himself in the portal. He's got 1 year left. So Nate Yardell, who's their starter the last couple of weeks, because their Eli Holstein, their other starter, got dinged up and had concussion issues. He's in the portal, so he'll be gone, and somebody will grab him for a year or whatever it is, or 2 years, and he'll probably cash in. And it's just a tough spot, I think, for the college coaches, and even for the fan base. I think it's tough because you never know who's gonna, guys are gonna stay, go, why are they going? I mean, you just there's so many questions, I think, with all of it. It sets up a tough situation.
And it could also hurt the kid's development. If you're playing a kid early and he really needs that redshirt year to sit back and get acclimated to everything and the academic piece and get everything in line, and you playing him early just because you're afraid he's going to enter the portal, could really hurt his development.
It's a tough. Yesterday, I think was it Clemson? Somebody yesterday had a kid who played the first. You can only play 4 games and you got a red shirt, but these extra games don't count. So
they don't count.
I think it was Clemson. I think they had a receiver or somebody. They played the first 4 games, and they were going to redshirt them. So now they're going to bring them back. Now they brought them back for the conference championship game, and now they'll be able to play through the bowl, which is even more. I didn't even know you could do that. I thought it used to be you were done.
Well, think about it. You could, if you go on to the championship, you could play 5 games in the playoffs, and then 4, regular season. You play 9 games, but you still get your red shirt.
Still get the red shirt. Yeah, it's a pretty good deal. I didn't know they could do that. So I heard them saying yesterday about the one player, but and I think that's why a lot of the kids, if they know they're not going to play, or the playing is going to be real sporadic, they want the red shirt year because they don't want to waste a year, sitting on a bench. So
sure.
It does. It puts them in. The coaches really have to make a lot of decisions as far as rosters go and numbers go when you have to kind of deal with the freshmen coming in.
So what do you think's the way to fix it? Do you think it should be one transfer and an exception, or do you think there's other things that could be done?
Well, I really like the old rule where if you transferred, you had to sit out. Yeah. Right. I mean, I always liked that. And you lost a year when you sat out. So if a coach leaves, I think that's a totally different situation. If the guy who was recruiting you leaves, I think that should be that's a get out of jail free card, so to speak. That's
a big deal for the kid. A lot of times the kids are choosing their position coach.
Totally agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But other than that, like, to me, I don't know. I have no problem if you give them one during their 4 years, and then once they graduate, to me, it should open, right? You got your degree. The student fulfilled what they had to fulfill, and I think that should be an open door as well. So that's, to me, the best way to fix it. That would stop all this moving around, and tell somebody they're going to go from 4 years now or 3 years down to 3 or 2. That might change prospects a little bit of why and how these kids are constantly going to the portal.
Bill, you got anything there, buddy?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's, again, like NIL, it's just become kind of the Wild West. It's just kids moving. It's almost become like, it's almost worse than the pros. At least with the pros, you sign a multi-year deal. You're there for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then you become a free agent. Now these kids are just, almost always a free agent. I mean, it's going to get to the point where, if I don't like what the coach did this week, I'm going to transfer, and next week I'm going to be in another team. Like, it's getting ridiculous.
I listened to, I love Gino Auriemma from UConn, the girls coach. He's very, his perspectives to me are very to the point. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He had a great interview the other day, and he pretty much said this: the college athletes should be treated like the pro athletes. Now they're getting all these bonuses. They should have to sign a contract. In the contract, if they're getting this $500,000 payment, if they leave, they got to pay back the $500,000 if they don't stay at some of these schools. I think that that to me would cure a lot of the ills of what goes on now, because they'd be locked in now, and not being able to constantly move around and get all these new deals. Because if you told a kid, you know, let's say that kid from Michigan again, you're getting $12 million, where if you leave, you got to pay back the 12 million. I guarantee those kids would stay a little bit longer than constantly going to the portal if they don't play, which again would fix it. And again, the kids want to be paid like professionals, right? So let them sign a contract, and that would, you know, you either break the contract and pay the money back, or you're staying for the, you know, 3 or 4 years, or whatever, with the contract you sign, which to me would cure a lot of the garbage that goes on with kids moving and coaches being handcuffed as far as what they have to do with rosters every year.
What about, I know, George, I don't know if Pittsburgh has this or BC, but I know Notre Dame has a position. I'm not sure the exact title, but it's almost like a financial counselor for these kids at NIL. And you know, if they're getting these big money deals, it teaches them how to invest that money, and not, you know, so they just don't go, you hand an 18-year-old kid $1 million, you know, I know what I would have done at 18. You know, so it's like they have to have this counselor, this advisor, to tell them how to spend this money and invest it wisely. Do they have that at Pitt? Is that a common thing in schools?
Most of the schools now have a staff almost in place to deal with, you know, with the NIL stuff. So they pretty much have an NIL group that'll, you know, take care of the kids as far as that goes. There's a lot of collectives now too that a lot of the schools have, you know, collectives as far as bringing some of the money in and you know, how the money gets deviated and things like that. So I think they all have this now. There's so much money involved. You know, I think, geez, I was just watching, we were going to Pitt the one weekend. They were talking about Ohio State. I think the kids they brought in were like $30 million, wherever they paid for the NIL stuff. So the amount of money that, you know, is being thrown around, they don't have any choice, but I think to have people in place to kind of help these kids out and guide them as far as that whole process goes. And like I said, the big money kids all have handlers. So, you know, those handlers are doing, you know, they're financial advisors, they're, you know, they're commercial advisors, they're advertising advisors. So they even have, I think, staffs involved with them even now to take care of all this money they're bringing in.
You just have to hope that you know, those people are trustworthy. Here's, I mean, so many stories of these people ripping off you know, leaving the kids, or, you know, leaving these athletes with absolutely nothing because they, you know, they've spent all the money, and they've, you know, it's crazy what can happen. You know, you see the documentaries, you hear all these stories about these athletes who have signed multi-million dollar contracts, and they're left absolutely destitute and in debt because they chose the wrong people. You know, it was the people from the neighborhood, or, you know, my cousin, or my, you know, whoever, you know, and they don't know that those are not the right people to choose. Somebody has to tell them, hey, you need to hire somebody who, you know, who you can trust, somebody reputable, somebody who doesn't have, you know, that streak in them where they want to steal from you. They just, you know, it's crazy. And there can't be that many trustworthy people, you know, with all of these athletes now making all these millions of dollars at the college level. You have to, I don't know, there's got to be something, I guess, hopefully the NCAA is taking care of this, but there really has to be some sort of a pool of these guys who can, or, you know, gals or whoever, who can help the athletes and manage their money and help them to, you know, figure out who they can trust and who they can't trust.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that more. Geez, I was just reading about Baker Mayfield the other day. I think he's suing his father for $12 million or something. They mismanaged funds, and
amazing.
But I think you're going to see more and more. You know, it's almost like what they do with agents now. They have to be certified for a lot of these things to occur. And I think the college level has it to a certain extent. I think they have a list of people that are you know, certified with certain things. So I think you'll see that more and more. And I even, you know, like I said, my son Dylan wants to get into law. I said, you should get into the sports part of it with or something like that. I mean, it's good, especially, you know, you could be a college sports agent. You've been through the sport, seen it all. I think my son Adam will do the same thing. So, you know, having been, you know, through the process, it makes it a lot easier when you can, you know, advise some of these student athletes as far as what to do and what they're capable of getting and what they should be doing with it when they're done with it.
Yeah, it's a great field to get into right now. It's going to explode. I mean, it's probably, you know, already doing that. So
Yeah, I would agree.
yeah. And we will be right back. And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah. And there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, you know, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you know, you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, you know, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. I mean, again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love.
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
So George, talk to me a little bit about the Northeast PA, specifically football recruiting, because I remember back, you know, the heydays, the late 80s, early 90s, you've seen a lot of superstars that came out of this area, like just from Notre Dame. I mean, Rocket Ishmael from Wilkes-Barre and Tim Ruddy from Dunmore, Ron Paulus from Berwick. And you just don't see that type of athlete coming now in the college football. Do you think that was just a generational era back then in the late 80s, early 90s, or do you think there's still a lot of good football Division I recruits coming out of here?
I think it's good. I just don't think it's, and even back when you go to those, the numbers are limited. I mean, we just don't have the, you know, it's just like baseball to me is the best example because, and football to a certain extent. Like one of my best friends, Steve Pratico, lives down in Tampa. So his son is a 7th grader now. He's starting to get into football a little bit more, but you know, they'll play football in the fall and then they'll start right back up again for the spring. So they're really getting 2 seasons compared to, you know, what we're getting here in Northeast PA with 1. And then the same thing, I can use my other son, Dylan, like a baseball. You know, you go to down south, they're starting to play in the beginning of January. We're not getting on the field here until March, you know, the middle of March. So I think you're seeing just more numbers of athletes in a lot of those places just because of the resources and the weather and things they're able to do. But
yeah, that's a good point.
We have some kids, I think, that are you know, that are good and getting looks by D1 schools. I just don't think the sheer numbers of, you know, teams you're playing and what we're capable of doing here, you know, allows for a lot of that. And I think years ago, you had some area recruiters that wanted to get somebody from the area all the time. You know, this was like a hotbed and you wanted to get that top guy from here. And now I just don't think we're in that situation now with, you know, with the number and it's really just a numbers game. I mean, if you're and again, I recruited it when I was in college. If you're a recruiter, I could go to Philly or Allentown and places like that, go to some of these private schools, I could pull 10 to 20 kids out of there. And if I come around here, I might get one. So
Sure.
I'm going to spend more time in those hotbed areas where I could get 20 versus my chances of getting the one kid, I think, from our area. And it's just, it's luck of the draw, I think, with just the kids we have, as far as what they're able to do. And like I said, just being a little bit behind with weather-wise and stuff like that we run into.
You kind of seen that in the Valley View to state playoff game where they played that team. I believe that team was a Catholic school from Philly, right around Philly.
Yeah.
And you could just see that I was at that game, and you could just see the different level of speed those kids had. I mean, it just.
You're pulling from these metropolis areas that are, hundreds of thousands of people where you can, tell your kids you can pick these. Harrisburg does the same thing. I mean, if you live in Harrisburg, you're sending your kid to Bishop McDevitt. I mean, it's a big time school. It's they're going to get.
Ricky Waters came out of there, didn't he?
Yeah, they're going to get 7 to 10 kids every year going, to major D1 schools and those Power 4 schools and why wouldn't you send your kid there if they're a decent athlete? So if you're a recruiter, you're hitting those places first. You might get how many from there, and then you're kind of trickling down and hoping you can hit a couple in some of the other schools. So that's I think the reason why you don't see as many. And also, I mean, this football is a size and like football, especially, it's a size and speed thing. I mean, you're an offensive lineman, you got to be 6'6", or you're not going to Penn State, or you're not going to Notre Dame. You're not going. So, I always tease everybody around here. We have the short little Italians where they, their kids are 5'10" kids instead of the 6'6" kids you're getting in some of these other areas. So
it's unbelievable the size of some of these kids coming out of high school. I mean, like you just said, you can't be a left tackle prospect unless you're 6'5", 6'6", coming out of high school and pushing 300 pounds, and you're going to have to be able to move.
Yeah, I when I was going through the recruiting process with Naeem Wortman, when he was going to a bunch of schools and looking at things, I was at Penn State a lot. We were at Rutgers, and he had offers from Florida, and we were kind of all over the place. But you really don't get a true perspective, and I think the normal person on this planet doesn't get a true perspective until you literally walk into these rooms and see. My wife sees it, and I've seen it for so long. My wife got a first glance when we were going through Naeem, and then now with Adam, you step into an elevator with Adam and his roommates and some of the guys that are playing. Like, Adam's really good friends with Gavin Bartholomew, who's a freshman All-American tight end, and he'll be probably a top 3 or 4 round draft pick. I mean, he's as big as the doorway, 6'5". He'll be probably a 4.5 40 kid. Probably throw 225 up 25 to 30 times when he does his, with a 36-inch vertical. That's what you're dealing with, and that's the kind of kid that that's a roster of Alabama kids, and Ohio State kids and Notre Dame kids.
Right.
And that's the thing that people. My wife's first, I always laugh at this. Her first sideline experience at a game, we went to see Penn State play Alabama the first time, whatever it was, 10 years ago when Alabama was at Penn State. We walked around on the sideline, before and during the game. And my wife's like, holy God, are these guys big? And I said, yeah, that's those people sitting in the stands and are like, my kid could be playing. No, they can't.
It's not just football though. My daughter runs cross country, and the kids that are, they go to districts and the kids look like kids. They look like, 11th and 12th graders. Then you go to states and you see some of these girls look like they're WNBA players. I mean, they're in amazing shape. They're amazing, just physically. They must just train constantly. They don't look like 11th and 12th graders. They look like college, pro athletes. It's amazing. And that's just cross country. I can't even imagine what these football and basketball players must have.
So, I mean, Dylan played last year in the Cape Cod League, which is, the Cape Cod League is just a first round baseball league pretty much in America, right? So, we're going to those games. There's pitchers that are 6'8", 6'9", these big lefties throwing 95 miles an hour. Then you got these kids coming up to bat. They're about 240, 6'4", 240, can run like a deer. They're hitting balls, at 120 miles an hour off the bat. It's and this is what you're, when I always had these conversations I always try to have it with parents that are, that say, oh, well, how come my son didn't get recruited to go here or go? And I always tell people, go watch some of these, these major programs, go watch a game, go look online at their stats, like where they're at. You get a really good look at where your kids would kind of blend in when you can, when you get to that point. So
just watch one of those 6A Texas state title games and
oh my
and
God,
see the athletes that they have. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible. And like you touched on earlier, some of these high schools, I mean, they're developing these kids, these big areas. I mean, it's all year round. It's the strength program and they're constantly working on their craft and they're preparing them for the next level.
Yeah. And these high school, you go to IMG Academy when you use an example down in Florida. I mean, people are always like, well, why would he go to IMG? Well, because their whole roster is going to go to a Division I school.
Yeah.
And they're playing the top team. And again, listen, I'm a college recruiter. Do I want to go to IMG where they're playing the top 7 teams in the country? Or do I want to go to, Valley View, who's playing Honesdale and and I'm not knocking, but that's when you compare and contrast what these recruiters are looking for. You're getting a kid from IMG can come into your program and start as a freshman. Some other places it's a question mark, and you can't afford to miss. You're bringing 20 kids in a year, and you just, with all the money around, you just can't afford to swing and miss. So they're much more likely to take a chance on an IMG kid than, let's say, a small rural kid from like a place around here.
Well, we have had a couple of kids from Valley View make the major leagues in the last couple of years. We had Max Kranick and my apologies, I can't remember the other kid's name.
Mason Black's the other.
Mason Black, right? So it just shows you. I mean, it's the athlete. If you are that good, if you're good enough to get there, you're going to get there. You just have to, you have to stay focused, and you have to have the right people around you. But
and Bill, I'm just gonna talk to that for a second. Now Max was throwing 96 miles an hour out of high school, or 95. So again, he had that trait, just like a kid who's going to run a 4.2 40 playing football or whatever, or a kid in basketball that can jump out of the gym. He was in a position where he had that, that talent level. And again, coached by his dad, well coached, all those things he had working with him. And then Mason really came on the scene when he went to the Cape Cod League and lit it up and threw, he was the starter for their All-Star game and had a 1-point-something ERA. So same thing there, same type of deal. Dad coached him a little bit, had some good background. But again, those things to me they're outliers, because you don't see those. That's those. Mason, the same thing, 96, 97 miles an hour wherever he's throwing his fastball. Those things can set you apart. And you're right, no matter where you're at, somebody's going to find you. But I'm talking more about those kids in that middle area where I'll go to IMG and take the middle area kid there versus the the level kid from a smaller spot.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why somebody's paying the money to go to send their kid to IMG versus staying at their local high school or whatever, the prep school or whatever.
Well, and plus the more time a recruiter is going to spend at a school, he's going to see more players other than the one he was there to see. Right. So that,
I mean, Bill, you and Sean, but I mean, I could say this when I had Naeem at Valley View, I had 35 Division I schools coming in. The next year, I had 35 Division I schools coming in because Naeem was there the year before.
Sure.
And as as those numbers started to dwindle, my 35 was down to like 5 maybe by the time I was ready to leave. And again, it's a numbers game. You go to IMG, you're getting every school in the country is sending a representative down there to see. And watch practice. Even I can use our local area. Lackawanna College is getting, every big school in the whole eastern part of the United States is coming to Lackawanna to watch a practice there. For those types, those kids that are your D1 kids, whether they went from a D1 program to there or they, whatever mishap they had that had them ending up, in a certain spot. But that's the same type of deal. So that would give you a better perspective of how some of these larger high schools are.
Yeah. Just a quick funny story though about Max. My wife was his teacher in 4th grade, and these kids were super competitive. Even then, they would come in from recess with bleeding and bruises and everything. And my wife would say, you guys aren't going to make the NBA or the NFL. And Max showed her.
Well, we all think that way, don't we? I mean, listen, my son Dylan played with Mason and Dixon Black. So I coached Little League with George Black all the way up through. So, if you told me in Little League that, and listen, I can tell you something for locally. Our Little League team had Mason Black, who's playing in the pros. Dixon played 4 years at Division I school and was a great player. Dylan's at BC now. Ryan Cesarini got drafted by the Guardians. He was on that team. Played at St. Joe's. Yep. Zach Kowalczyk's playing Division I baseball. I mean, there's 5. And then a couple of years before, they had Max on that team. So, Valley View's had a nice baseball run, at least, with a good chunk of kids who, were Division I kids and kids getting drafted. So they've had a nice run as far as that goes.
And we will be right back. DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania.
George, I'm sure, 2 sons in the ACC, you watched a lot of ACC football. And I watched a lot because Notre Dame has agreement. They play to 5 ACC teams. And I think the ACC is a very underrated football conference, especially this year. When I look at, I would love the Big Ten and the SEC is getting, and I look at those conferences this year as top heavy. Like the top 2-3 teams in the Big Ten and SEC are better than the top 2-3 teams in the ACC. But then when you get to the next level and the mid-level and down towards the bottom, I mean, that ACC is pretty tough. When you take a team like Georgia Tech, and you just saw what they did with Georgia, taking them to 8 overtimes. That's a physical running team. Or you take a team like Louisville, who's got athletes all over on the perimeter, and that Brooks that they have, the transfer from Alabama, that kid's a stud. So I think the ACC is a very underrated conference. And when you look at once you get past those 2-3 teams, I think they're very competitive with the Big Ten and SEC, but they don't get the respect that they deserve. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I have a hard time, being a football guy. This 12-team playoff thing, it sends me into a tizzy. I have a hard time with it. I just think the experts that are on and the pundits, whatever you want to call them, I just think I don't think there's a lot of honesty in what they do. I think there's a lot of background things that go on. I'm an eye test guy. Like, I want to watch a game. You can tell who the good teams are. Just watch, you can watch a game and I think that, I don't like the fact, one of my big gripes about college football is they have these committees to pick the 12 teams that I don't know if they're football people. Like to me,
they're usually associated with a school.
Yeah, they're associated. And I just don't know how much they actually know about football. I really don't. I have a hard time with that. Like, I was texting back and forth with somebody yesterday, and again, this is just my feeling, but I think Texas is very overrated as a football team. They played 2 good teams. They played Georgia twice this year and lost twice, one at home and one in a neutral site. And Georgia didn't even have a quarterback yesterday. Their quarterback was standing on the sideline. He couldn't even move his arm. The SEC gets a lot of love, and I think this year, I think it's an average league. I really do.
I agree. Totally agree.
And they, I'm just going to say it. I think a lot of the Big Ten teams, I'm not a big Penn State lover. I'm not. So, Penn State played 2 really good teams and lost the bowl. I but again, I don't think they're a bad football team, but I just don't know. I have a hard time. I think the rankings to me are what screws everything up.
Yes.
And I really think, I don't think college teams should be ranked until week 5. I think they should let the teams play. You know, Florida State this year starts off as a top 5 team or top 10 team. They won 2 games. But it's going to look like if you played them early that you played the number 4 team in the country or whatever they were, which I think totally takes away from, you know, they're looking at some of these things like strength of schedule and all these things. Like, I'm laughing today. They're talking about why they pick certain teams, and they're like, oh, well, they beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was 6-6 in the SEC.
Right.
I just, and then they're holding a loss of Miami losing to Syracuse. Syracuse is a 9-3 football team or whatever this year. They're holding that against Miami, losing to a 9-3 football team because they're not
really good
top
offense.
10. And they're, I mean, my question, I had this discussion early with people in the year just because I see all the Pitt games. Pitt and Penn State played a pretty similar schedule up until week 6.
Yeah.
Penn State was in the top 5 and Pitt wasn't even ranked.
Yeah, and they were undefeated, Pitt. I mean,
I don't understand how, you know,
there's
again,
a bias towards the ACC. And you know,
I just think the Big Ten and the Big Ten and the SEC get a lot of the benefit of the doubt that their teams are better than a lot of these teams, but I just don't necessarily think that all things are equal when you're looking at the rankings and
it's
you know,
not.
Well, it's also, George, because it's become a year-round sport, like all these other sports. And you know, ESPN is going to give you the top 25 for next year, the Tuesday after the national championship game. Yeah. So it's
and they're paying a ton of money to put their games on TV. You know, so the Big Ten's getting a gazillion dollars, the SEC is getting a gazillion dollars. So they do everything possible, I think, to get that brand.
Sure. And the ESPN has the deal with the SEC. So they're going to push the SEC, and that's where come into the media bias, where you have all these guys like Paul Feinbaum, who only sees the SEC. He doesn't respect anybody outside the SEC. And it's, to me, like you said, George, I think it's an average conference. Once you get past those 2-3 teams, and I think the Big Ten too, like I think, give me any of those teams in the middle against the ACC teams, like Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin. I mean, the middle level of the ACC could beat any of those teams. I mean,
the thing that's problematic to me, and they're, like I said, I just watched the 12-team playoff thing, and it was between SMU and Alabama for that 12th spot. You only play the teams that they put on your schedule. I mean, you can't, like, they don't say, all right, you have a good team in September here, we're gonna restructure your schedule. Like, you got to beat the teams that are on the schedule. So you know, SMU played the teams that are on their schedule, and they, you know, they lost whatever 1 or 2 games, whatever it was. And then, you know, Alabama got their schedule and lost 3 games. I mean, you know, and I know Nick Saban was on there saying all schedules aren't equal. Well, in your mind, the SEC is better than, so you don't think it is equal. But to me, like I said, I watched the ACC games. Louisville's a good football team. Syracuse is a good football team. You know, Duke was a good football team. Pitt was a good football team, you know, before some guys got dinged up. So, you know, there's some really, Miami's good. Like, there's some good football teams these teams are beating. So I just don't know how you can say, well, beating Vandy means more than beating Louisville. I don't believe in that.
Even like Oklahoma destroyed Alabama. Alabama didn't score a touchdown. Oklahoma's not a good football team. I've seen them play several times this year. It doesn't matter the brand name. That's not a good football. That's a mediocre 6-6 team or whatever their record is.
There was 3 weeks in a row when it was like, oh, they have to play Kentucky this week. Kentucky's 4-8.
4-8.
Like, what's I mean, I don't understand the big draw to, well, you have to play Kentucky. Why? Because Kentucky played close against Georgia. Well, Georgia Tech, you know, did what they did. I mean,
Georgia Tech is a physical team. I mean, their running game is one of the best in the country, really. I mean,
and that's my big, like I said, that's my big gripe with these guys that are on there.
Yeah.
You know, Booger McFarland was just on, and they were hammering him. You say, you know, Kirk Herbstreit was hammering the fact that online, you know, they're talking about this brand recognition getting you in. It's factual. They can say whatever they want. He's like, oh, it's low-lying fruit. It's not low-lying fruit. It's a brand. You want certain teams in so you can make more money when the games go. I mean, that's all that they can say whatever they want.
Yep.
And listen, in years past, Sean, you're a Notre Dame guy.
Yeah.
Notre Dame loses to a 1AA team, technically, right? Or they'd be out. There's not a snowball's chance they'd be getting in, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, this year now with getting 12 in, and listen, you know this too. I'm sorry. Navy and Army are not major Division I football teams that were ranked when no, and I'm not knocking
Sure,
Notre
that's
Dame.
not a top 20 team.
Yeah, I mean, that's not like playing, major conference teams. So again, you're boosting that brand, let's say,
Sure.
by ranking some of these teams that I think in years past wouldn't be ranked.
Again, like you said, the schedule is what it is, though. Like with Notre Dame schedule Florida
That's
State,
right.
they didn't expect them to be 2-10.
Correct.
Or
Correct.
USC, they didn't expect
USC was supposed to be really good this year. They're
And
500,
USC is
right?
athletic. That's an
Yeah.
athletic team, but
Right.
I think they're poorly coached.
Right. And I just, that plays into part of it. And I just think at the end of the day, people can say what they want. There's so much money involved. It's always going to play a role in them picking, some of these teams, in my opinion, at least. Because they're always going to have those kind of teams ranked at the top. They're going to give them a little bit of a leg up on the next. And listen, I watched Boise State play 10 times this year. They're not very good. They're going to get.
They got one player.
Penn State has the easiest run now to get to that. They're going to play an average team in round one. The winner of their game is going to go play Boise in round two, which I think is going to be. I don't think Boise is going to have any chance against anybody in that first round. And they're going to roll into the that next game.
George, if you look at Penn State, like, let's be honest, what good win do they have? I've never seen a team that gets so much credit for losses. In that game last night, if you look at game control, Oregon control, they were in the.
Oregon was up 2 touchdowns most of the game. Yeah, I agree.
And they were up by 18 at one point. I mean, Penn State was playing from behind. But what win does Penn State hang their hat on? Illinois? I mean, is Illinois better than Georgia Tech or Louisville? I don't think so.
Well, according to the numbers, they, with the rankings. Listen, I'll give you another one. Ohio State went from 2 to 6, losing to Michigan. Michigan doesn't have a quarterback.
No, they didn't.
And you played them at home and you only scored 13 points or whatever they like. I just think it goes to show certain teams get a pass, and certain teams don't. Like, to me, Ohio State, you lose at home to Michigan, 6-5 team. You lose at home to Michigan without a quarterback, down to your walk-on third stringer.
Yeah.
Then you should drop back more than 4 spots in a ranking, to me, if that occurred. Again, that's just my opinion. As a football guy, that's my opinion.
Well, George, I really think that they put in SMU over Alabama. The only reason they did that is because they made such a big deal about the conference championship game. If you make your conference championship game, they're not going to hurt you if you lose. And they can't just totally disrespect the ACC by saying, hey, they lost their game, they're out. So that's the only reason. I think if that game wasn't that close, I think SMU would have been out. If that game, like, they had to come back. If they didn't come back in that game and Clemson blew them out, I think they would have pricked Alabama. I really do.
I think if SMU was let's say SMU was a third team, like, let's say Miami played Clemson, I think and let's say Clemson like did what they did yesterday and you had the upset, I think that you would have seen Alabama in instead of, if SMU was idle, listen, how about Indiana?
Yeah.
They got one loss against the one good team they played all year. They had a nail biter against Michigan, and they played again another team that didn't play a great schedule.
Yeah.
They're the same way as SMU. They were making a big deal about SMU getting in. Indiana didn't play anybody this year either.
Oh,
and they're going to go play Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean,
I really think, like, if you look at, like you mentioned, Louisville and Georgia Tech, I watched them play. I watched the Notre Dame play, both of them. They have athletes all over the place.
Yeah.
Those are very good teams, and the Carolina teams are good. I mean, I think the ACC is really underrated. It really is.
The problem is now you're going to see, which I don't like what people do, because now they go to, well, let's see what they do in the bowl games. But you have kids opting out. It's just it's totally different. And the kids know that it doesn't really matter if you win the bowl game. It's a different kind, it's a different type of deal.
It's basically a spring game for the next year.
Go and have a good time. The kids go, they want the gift packages, they get the bags of stuff they give them. And then, you think any college athlete right now wants to practice for another 3 more weeks to play in a bowl game? That what does it mean? Unless you're playing for the in this top 12. What are the other bowl games? I mean, you're
Yeah, nothing. So what's your perspective going into the postseason now, the playoffs? You see, like, I don't see any, like, surefire favorite to win the whole thing this year. Even Oregon, you seen yesterday. I mean, they're, I think it's wide open.
Well, I'm not sure to me at least, if you're a top 4 team, other than getting to bye the first week, I mean, you're not playing a home game, right? You're neutral site with everything. So you're not even getting a whole lot out of it other than getting a week off, but or the extra week or whatever it is, that bye week. But yeah, I'm with you. I think it's totally open. I think football is going to be this way. I think basketball is going to be that way when you get to that March Madness. I mean, there's not really, gone are the days when one team kind of is overstacked, and just because there's so much money flying around, I think you're going to see that now. There's a lot of teams are about equal, and anybody can kind of win it. I think Penn State has the best path, to be honest with you.
They do have the easiest path,
yeah, based on who they have them playing, and being home the first week and then getting Boise the second week if you can win. I mean,
that's the thing, like you just mentioned. Like, what advantage do you get as having a bye? Like, that's a fail with the system, because that 5th seed actually has the best path. I mean, that's the best. That's what you want.
Yeah, well, Texas and Texas was the 5. I think they have a little tougher.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Texas the 5. It's the 6 I'm talking about. They have the 6.
Penn State got the 6. I think they have the best draw, to be honest with you.
They do, yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I just think there's so many nuances. I was laughing watching the thing because last year they didn't let Florida State in the playoff because their quarterback got hurt. Yeah. Georgia's quarterback's arm was hanging off yesterday. I mean, is he going to play? They got the 2 seed. Like, to me, as a committee, they should have said their quarterback got hurt. They should have, to me, dropped down a couple spots based on what they did last year.
Well, Kirby was trying to get him out there. He was trying to get him out there. He didn't care his arm was hanging. That guy drives me crazy. Like, Georgia had a great guy like a Mark Richt, who was a really good guy and cared about his players and stuff, but they pushed him out because he couldn't win a championship. So they bring in a guy like Kirby he's all about winning.
I'd like to see the committee next year, like, have a set of parameters that they're going to look for going in, and like how they're going to decide each week where to rank these teams. So I think it would take away a lot of the questions that people have. Like, are you looking at strength of schedule? Or you're looking at, opponents, or you're looking at, margin of victory? Like, there's so many things you can look at. I wish they would just say, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's the order we're looking at, and it would put it, I think, stuff in a little more perspective.
Because there doesn't seem to be any consistency with how they're ranking these. They're just, in the Big Ten and SEC are getting the benefit on everything.
And that's my feeling. That's why I said I just think it would be nice if you knew what they were. And they come back and they tell you all this stuff, and I think a lot of it's just garbage, or it's lip service.
Sure. Like you said, how much do these committee members actually know football? I would really like to know the background of these guys, and how many actually play.
See them get, like, you could get a committee of former coaches together. Like, I'd like to see Bill Belichick, a Nick Saban, even some of these guys that maybe aren't affiliated anymore, even like a Kirk Herbstreit, these guys that see games, get a bunch of guys like that together that don't have any, hooks to anything, and let them, they're football guys. The top 12 teams should be the teams that make it. It shouldn't have any bearing on, and conference championships obviously would be an automatic, but other than that, I think, they should be able to go in and pick the next best teams.
As long as they're not still working for a network, like ESPN has a tie-in with a conference.
It's a tough thing with the tie-ins, yeah.
Right, sure.
I agree.
So, George, this has been fantastic, buddy. I know we kept you here over an hour, but
okay.
One last thing I want to talk about. Billy, you have anything before I get to our last topic?
No, go ahead, Sean.
We're going to talk a little baseball, George. So me and you are big Red Sox fans, and Billy's, of course, a Yankee fan. And the way I see the Red Sox is when John Henry and them guys first bought the team, it was all about beating the Yankees. And whatever the Yankees spent, the Red Sox were going to spend at least as much or more. And they were interested in winning a championship. And since they won 4, it seems to me like they're invested in these other projects like NASCAR and Liverpool soccer and all this other stuff, and they just don't have the desire and the energy that they're putting into the Red Sox now. And I think it might be time for new ownership. Do you agree, or do you see them maybe spending the money this year in getting a Soto or somebody, or spending money on pitching? Or how do you see the future of the Red Sox?
Well, it looks like they're going to spend, which I'm happy about because I just think the Red Sox fan base is so rabid with things. Like you got to keep this up. And listen, I can tell you this. We go to Fenway every year, so we take a family trip out there. It's like the one trip I don't have to twist my kids' arms to go to. They love going to Boston and love being at Fenway. But Fenway Park has changed in the last 15 years. Like you went 15 years ago to a Red Sox Yankee game, it was 90% Red Sox, 10% Yankees, and Yankee fans just get beat up in the stands. Now you fast forward, it's just as loud for Yankee fans there.
Sure.
They've kind of gotten away from all the tickets now are bought through these brokers. So there's more tickets available. And I think the ownership, I think when you win, it takes away a little bit of that drive to do more to win. So
I agree.
I think the ownership, once they won some World Series, with the Sox, which was 3 and whatever, how many years that they had won 3 out of the last 10 or whatever it was, or 4 or whatever. I think you lose a little bit of that where you have to do that every year because you did it. Now the Yankees, I think, are in that point now because they haven't won in so long. They're trying to drive back up to get to that point. So, I think this year is a little different than last year for the Sox. So I think the ownership guys like Kennedy came out and said, they're going to spend some more money and stuff like that, which I'm happy about. So, I think they'll get back to, maybe getting to that luxury tax and points there where your roster is a little bit better and the fan base will be a little happier with what you're putting on the field.
Do you think they're a major player for Soto, or do you think that's just all spin?
No, I think they're paying. I think, I think they lost out on Mookie Betts. I think they regret that for the last couple of years where they didn't, spend what they could have spent to get him. And I think it's made them look bad. And what they got back in return hasn't been very good either. So, which makes you look even worse. But, they spent the last couple of years building up their minor league system, which is excellent. Now they have some great players. They're able to come up, and that gives them some pieces now, I think, to, make trades for some big time guys that you could add to a Juan Soto or something like that. But they really haven't had, they haven't had a poster child for the Red Sox baseball, I don't think, since Ortiz left.
No,
so they really need, they had Betts, he left. They had Xander Bogaerts, and he left.
I think they thought Devers was going to be that, but I don't think he is.
He's not. If you read some articles about him, he's kind of laid back and quiet. He doesn't want to get interviewed. His English isn't great. I don't think he likes to go through the interview. So they need that, that person that that jersey seller, that person that everybody's going to kind of hang their hat on. And I think Soto could be that guy. Now, again, I don't like $700 million. I'd rather spend $700 million on 5 players rather than 1. But
right.
He's a great player as the Yankees.
The other thing, if you get him, go ahead, Billy.
Even as a Yankee fan, if the Yankees don't sign him, I'm not going to be all that disappointed. Although he is maybe one of the best on base guys you'll ever see. He fits right in with today's the way they do analytics today and everything. His OPS is unbelievable. He's always on base, whether he's walked or gets a hit or whatever. But ultimately, probably 3 or 4 years into this contract, he's going to be a DH. No matter where he's playing, he's going to be a DH. So, do you spend all that money for a guy who's going to make 4, possibly 5 appearances in a game?
Long-term deals when you're giving a guy 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
But the other problem, George, is if you get Soto, now you're kind of too left-handed. You got Soto, you got Devers, you got Duran. They're all left-handed hitters. You got to go out and get a big right-handed bat.
Yeah, I think if that occurs, they'll get some pitchers and they'll move some guys around. Arenado's out there where the Cardinals are trying to get rid of him, I think, through a trade, which would free some things up, give them another right-handed bat. And then, they have some good young guys coming up that I think are good in that regard. So I think they'd make some moves and change the lineup up. But Bill, I'm going to tell you this, and this is just me as a Sox fan. When Ortiz and Manny Ramirez were in the lineup together, that was devastating as far as scoring runs, doing things to pitching, what they did to teams pitching. And I just don't think when you have guys when you could put Soto and Judge together and they could kind I think you'd see as a Yankee fan, when you pull one of those guys out and put somebody else in there, it could be a total 180.
No question.
With
No question
how your
about it.
season could go.
Yeah.
And I think that's why these guys pay so much money for these. When you can hit home runs, get on base, and do what they do, and you can protect each other in a lineup, man, it is just, when you look at a MLB level and what they do with pitching, it's just devastating for pitchers.
Sure.
It really
Absolutely.
is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Your wins above, those WAR rankings and all those things
Right.
that they look at, your wins above replacement, I think, drop down a lot when you don't have that protection in lineup for, a lot of those guys when you're looking at the damage they can do, especially in the middle of a lineup.
Right. Yeah, no question about it. It's, I mean, that was, they said the same thing when, Giancarlo Stanton came over to the Yankees. That was going to be him and Judge or whatever were going to be. And Stanton has been great in the postseason, but you look at he misses a lot of games. All he can do is DH, and his contract, even though the Yankees aren't even paying the entire contract, it's still a drag. It's still a drag on, so I fear what could be, down the road. I mean, yeah, the first maybe 4, 5, 6 seasons with Soto and Judge together would be amazing, but what's going to happen after that? I just, you just wonder.
And I think so. I mean, you guys know this. Soto's big draws. He's 26. I mean, he's not 30.
Sure.
He's relatively young as far as baseball goes. So you're hoping you could get, at least 10 years out of that, where you're getting a stud in your lineup that can just hit the ball. I'd love to see him play at Fenway, because I think he would absolutely destroy that ballpark with the way he hits and where he sprays the ball around. But, just like Ortiz did as a lefty. But, like I said, if they lose out on him and they don't pay him $700 million and they could get some, some other pieces, I think they'd be fine too. So I'm just happy I hope they're actually in the mix. I don't know if they are or not. I don't know if it's lip service, but I'm glad they're kind of at least getting back to the ways where they know they got to do stuff for the fans and put a better product. I went to a game this year. We went up to, I forget even who the heck they were playing, but I mean, it was like watching a AAA.
Yeah.
They didn't have anybody in the lineup that was like a big bat or anything. I turned to my son Dylan. I'm like, holy God, if the Red Sox, what the heck's happened here?
What happened? Exactly.
But
I think
I'm
they
hoping they'll get back
overachieved
to
this
that.
year, George. Don't you think they kind of overachieved? I mean, I think they did.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean,
better than I am.
based on the team that they had out there. I mean, they were a AAA team for for a good chunk of the season, but and some guys dinged up, and I thought their pitchers overachieved, and but I think at least, like I said, at least there was a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel where they, you saw a little bit of a better product, and that they're going to make an effort to try to better that in the next year or so, which I hope they'll be able to do.
I hope so, buddy.
Yeah, we don't like this not making the playoffs. This is tough as a.
Oh, it's really, this is the thing. You get spoiled when you win championships. We went all those years without winning a championship, and you got used to losing the big one, and now it's like you get spoiled.
Bill, you can attest to this too. And I don't know how big of a fan your daughter is, but my daughter loves the Sox too. So we're like a true Red Sox family. Her and I were watching that Netflix thing the other day with the. We watched part 1 when they're,
that was
battle with the Yankees. But she was even amazed. She's like, "Is this what it was like?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is what." And Fenway is a great place to watch a game. Like I said, we go every year just for the ambiance of the park. I think it's the best park in the United States. But 10, 15 years ago, it was a totally different animal.
It was a war, boy.
Than it was now. I mean, you went to those games, it was
incredible,
loud, obnoxious, the energy, like you literally could feel, like it's a weird thing to kind of, I don't know if you ever went to the games then, but it was like a true electricity would run through that stadium when the Yankees played the Red Sox. And even when you watched at home, it was like that. You were, your hair was standing up on the back of your neck watching some of those games.
Well, I think the 03-04 ALCS, I think those were the best games I've ever seen.
They were. I mean, they were the World Series. Those
years,
in my opinion. I don't remember 04. I don't know what happened. I
know he really forgets that.
I don't know. That somehow got deleted from my memory. But
I scream at my wife because I had 04 World Series tickets, and I mean, we're both teachers. We don't make a gazillion dollars. They were $1,500 a seat. I had a friend of mine who had season tickets.
Wow.
He's like, I'll give you the seats for $1,500. I remember going to Eileen and she's like, man, $3,000 is a lot. I said, Eileen, they have a chance to win their first World Series since 1918 or whatever it was. And I still to this day I wish we pulled the trigger and paid but those years when you went to games, man, the park was just a totally different atmosphere. Unbelievable. I hope it gets back to that.
Well, I'll tell you what, George, I don't think Sean and I could have done this podcast together 15 or so.
Not back then. Not back then. It was war. I mean, I remember my cousin Marty, we get in arguments. We wouldn't even talk because he's a Yankee fan. And we'd go weeks without talking.
Well, I'd always have, this in our area, especially, like there's a good mix of Red Sox fans. I mean, they're not boisterous or anything like that. I mean, obviously it's a Yankee and Philly area, but there's a good chunk of people that still like the Red Sox because when the Scranton Red Sox were here, there was, there's still some ties, but you would have some nice conversations. Like Stanley Kowarski's a big Yankee fan, so we'd be driving up to school together at Wallenpaupack and back and forth about the games. And I kind of missed that with with an ability to go through the games and have that good back and forth with the Yankees Red Sox again. Like I said, I'm hoping it gets, and if they do get Soto, it'll definitely go back to that.
Yeah, we'll go back.
I really hope they get him. So I think it'll immediately jazz up that rivalry even more.
No doubt about it. Yeah. Hey,
great.
George, this has been fantastic. We really appreciate you coming on. This is great conversation. I think we've gotten so far away from sports on this podcast, so we really enjoyed this. This was great coming back and talking about this.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's great.
Yeah.
Love talking sports.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back, buddy. You want
to anytime. I'm always available. I love, like I said, this stuff where we can talk about local stuff and what's going on out there in a true, I think, unbiased method is really what you need more than some of the pundits that are on there now. So.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. We agree, buddy. We agree. But go Sox, buddy.
Go Sox. I keep checking my watch. I get little things. I'm like, oh, please let it be Soto that he's coming.
Yeah, I'm checking too, buddy. But I don't know.
Hopefully it resolves soon because I don't know how long.
I think it'll
how long
we
could all take soon. This. It's getting ridiculous now.
I don't think those guys want to draw it out either. So I think
I agree. I agree. All right, George. Thank you very much.
You guys have a great holiday.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great holiday. All right.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.